geared up there. This meeting is live streamed and will be recorded and available on the internet by visiting the Town of Parry Sound's website at www.parrysound.ca. And I would like to begin the meeting by recognizing that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people within the Robinson-Huron Treaty Area and beside the waterways traveled by the Métis. So, it was moved by Councillor McCann and seconded by Councillor Burton that pursuant to section 239(2) and 3 of the Municipal Act, SO 2001, C25 is amended. Council Appropriation of the Town of Parry Sound moved to a meeting closed to the public in order to address matters pertaining to D, personnel matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, Director of Finance 6-month review, Director of Public Works employment agreement, and D, labor relations or employee negotiations, Director of Public Works employment agreement. That was carried, the meeting was held, and there will be some items coming forward from closed to deal with those items. Anyway, so next is, are there any additions or prioritization of the agenda? The possibility we might want to move up one particular item at least.
Could we move up 10.3.1?
Oh,
10.3.1, could we move that up, please?
Okay. Anything else? Okay, for the moment, we'll go with that. Mover and seconder for the agenda. Councillor Horn and Councillor Burton. The council agenda for January 21st, 2020 be approved as amended. All in favor? That's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest of the general nature thereof? Seeing none. May I have a mover and seconder for the minutes, please? Councillor Can and Councillor Borneman. The minutes of the regular council meeting held December 17th, 2019 be approved as circulated. Are there any discussion or comments with regard to those council minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Questions of staff? Mr. Brown's retired now, so there's no questions then? Councillor Keith, your microphone if you want to get.
Well, Mr. Thompson, you're next on the, I guess, on the block, so to speak, right? On the pecking order. But in any event, first of all, well, Happy New Year. And I'm also wondering, throughout the season, the Christmas season, how did things prevail in the town of Parry Sound in respect to fires and emergencies? Are we any different this year than last year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Happy New Year to council as well. Overall this year, with regards to fire department activity, we were down from the previous 2 years back to more of a normal that we had experienced from 2013 to 2016. So that generally speaks to about 150 fire emergency responses throughout the year. That would be normal. We were up in the years 2017 and 2018, but 2019 we were back down again. And of note would be that the volunteers were out 3 times over Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, so I extended my gratitude to them for taking time away from their families during those special periods to attend to emergencies in town. When we take a look at EMS throughout the district, our emergencies were also down throughout the year, probably by about 4 or 5% overall. So they were running approximately 6,000 emergencies throughout the district throughout the entire year.
Yes, Councillor Keith.
So what I'm asking then is, was there any, why do you think that happened, that we're down? Like, is there some proactive behavior that is occurring that is helping in any way?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. The fire prevention officer will always be happy to try to take credit for the decrease in fire emergencies throughout the town. And we do have a very robust fire prevention inspection program. throughout the town. And that does work and that does help. Of note also is the summer season has a great deal of effect on fire emergencies, mainly on our brush fire activity. And last year, most definitely, it did not, it wasn't as conducive to brush fires as the previous year. So that does have a significant impact on a year-over-year basis.
Any other questions? Correspondence instructions.
Worship, there are 7 items of correspondence. The first is from the West Parry Sound Health Center Auxiliary. It's a request for a tag day fundraising on July 10th, 2020, and that is handled by item 7.1 on the consent agenda. Second item is from Lynn Atkinson of the West Parry Sound Health Center with a request for proclaiming February 6th as zero tolerance for female genital mutilation. That item is also on the consent agenda as item 2. The third item of correspondence is from Susan Racina, the Executive Director of Parry Sound Downtown Business Association, with a notice of resignation of board member Amy Black. So on the consent agenda as well is a resolution removing the appointment of that board member and another board member who resigned in the fall. The fourth item is from Lori West, the clerk of the Township of McDougall. It's a resolution from McDougall Township rejecting a Parry Sound district-wide Ontario Health Team as is proposed by DSAB. The fifth item is from Karen Girard, Deputy Clerk of the Township of McKellar. And similarly, it's a copy of a letter to DSAB rejecting a Parry Sound district-wide Ontario Health Team as is proposed by DSAB. Sixth item is from Erica Kellogg, the Secretary of the Algonquin Highlands Health Center Committee. That is a resolution requesting more information from DSAB regarding district-wide Ontario Health Team. And this matter will likely appear on the February 4th Council agenda with respect to an Ontario Health Team. The last item is from Rita Orr, the Chief Executive Officer, and Tom Lundy, the Chair of the Parry Sound Public Library. And it's an item regarding the 2020 budget request and information regarding their past activities in 2019. And Ms. Orr and Mr. Lundy are also here this evening to make the presentation.
Good. Thank you. So we have 3 deputations tonight, and our first deputation is from Rita Orr, CEO of the Public Library. So welcome. You got a whole team.
Yeah. You do.
Yep. There's a side button there as well on this side. Yeah. Good.
Thank you, Mayor McGarvey, Council. I'm here to assist our team. CEO Rita Orr already been introduced, and Hartley Hutchinson.
Yes.
Oh, you didn't tell me. I'm sorry, Hartley Duncan. They're the brains and the producers of what you're going to see here in just a short little while. We'd like to, on behalf of the Board of Directors, thank Council and the Town of Parry Sound for your support of our program in the previous years and ongoing. I'd also like to recognize on behalf of the board the efforts and the invaluable input from the 2 councillors on our board. That's Vanessa Backman and Doug McCann. And as you'll see very, very shortly, we had a tremendous year in 2019. Numerous accomplishments. Some of them are mentioned in our written report, which you have, or hard copy report, which you have. And that's a credit again to our CEO and the staff at the Public Library, Parry Sound Public Library. So we're looking forward to continued growth in 2020. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the better looking group here and make this happen.
2019, what a year we've had at the Parry Sound Public Library, the little library that could. Imagine a place where you could sit, read, eat, write, learn, or create, all without having to pay for a cappuccino or a flaky pastry, or without feeling guilty for camping out in a coffee shop for an afternoon. We have learned a great deal during the months from May to October here at the Parry Sound Public Library. We have discovered what people are looking for in their library. A place where they are greeted with a smile, a warm atmosphere, friendly and helpful staff. In short, a home away from home where they can find a comfortable corner or access resources and information with ease. Viewing this commercial, you will see some interesting statistics, including an increase of 50% for visits to your public library. Yes, we had over 76,000 people come through our doors in 2019. Individuals continue to seek out a sanctuary where parents, toddlers, teenagers, adults, seniors, tutors, and the homeless can spend the day. The Parry Sound Public Library's goal is for 75% of our population to have a library card by the year 2024. This card provides access to a safe and welcoming environment, plus all the library's resources. But unlike the other plastic cards stuffed in your wallet, it's free. During the last decade, libraries have progressed from traditional reference and education, adding emphasis toward an outreach-based approach. This shift in focus strives to empower the community in mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being. Public libraries are moving forward in developing initiatives to assist our most vulnerable patrons. Libraries are the front lines for the homeless, social workers, those struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues. As a patron of the Parry Sound Public Library, your well-being and satisfaction in service is of the utmost importance to us. It is why we do what we do. Your little library that could will continue to provide an empowering environment to all who walk through our doors in 2020 and beyond.
I'm from Parry Sound. Do you have any questions?
Oh.
Sorry. First of all, I just want to say Happy New Year to all of you too. I have a bad cold, so I can't hear, and my ears are all plugged, so I'll let these two talk.
Was there anything further you wanted to add, or?
No, everything was in the letter and the presentation, and we're just hoping that you'll continue supporting us.
Any questions? Councilor Bachman? Oh, good.
Well, thank you for your presentation, that was really good. I just want to commend staff and of course the board for all the hard work this year. Just to highlight some of the things that I saw that was pretty amazing is the fundraising that went on by everyone, $30,000 this year. That is absolutely substantial to keeping so much of the programming going, and you know, that just shows the creativity of the staff and all the hard efforts, especially to have 285 children and adult programming and over 23 partnerships within the community. It just shows how integral you know, the public library system is, not only for Parry Sound but West Parry Sound. And I think that is evident in the number of people who have come through the doors, just alone 27,000 in our busy season of July and August, which really shows that you know, there's a lot of tourists and a lot of people from outside of our town taking advantage of this, and of course that brings economic value into our community. So again, I just want to, I'd like to put forth a motion to accept your letter of request to be considered in this year's budget.
Is there a second? Councilor Kent?
Yeah.
Okay. Second. Any discussion? All in favor of sending it to the budget? That's carried. Good. Councilor Kent, you have your hand up as well?
Yes, in addition to Councilor Bachman, thank you very much. I feel sort of mute, Tom, telling us where you're headed to in the next 12 hours. I know I should know this, in the video, something about old books brought in and sent out. Can you explain what that is?
Interlibrary loans. We brought in 500 books for our patrons, and approximately 800 books that went out to other libraries all over Ontario. Most of them are Northern Ontario libraries that have requested. I know it's going to be over 1,000 this year because we're just swamped in the interlibrary loans department, and which is great. It just shows that we have a good collection, and we're building on the collection. And it's taken 2 years to actually clean out the old and bring in new. And also we've been working the last 4 months on inventory, and so we've just about finished that. So that helps with the database and just in general, just keeping it alive, the collection, and not having a deadbeat collection, because books are still in. People still like books. So
as a follow-up then to that, then that particular program, was it in jeopardy? I thought funding had been cut from that, but at the last 11th hour it was saved.
it was saved. The majority was cut in the south. They lost their transportation courier trucks. So we in the north have always done it by mail. So that's what we pay, and we get reimbursed for the stamps. So down the south though, they had courier systems, so that's what was cut. So now the south is also using the mail system, but they're not sending out as many books as they used to, because they have to rejuggle their budgets due to stamps, for example, and they've all gone up in the last week.
Well, it is a viable service. I know that in a project that I'm working on, doing some research, sometimes you can't always get what you want through Google. And in this case, I was able to get a book from Sudbury at no cost to me, and there was some valuable information in there, so that was
we just put a request in, that's coming in from Vancouver, and there's no cost. So I thought that was great.
Thank you.
And that is one of the advantages of our library that we have here, that it does have access to libraries across the country.
Correct.
So that people can access the book from somewhere and have it brought here, whereas some private libraries cannot do that, so.
Right.
It is a bonus that we
Oh,
do.
it is, and I don't wanna see it lost.
No.
No.
Yeah, absolutely not. Any further questions, Councilor Keith?
Yes, first of all, I wanna ask the question, Ms. Orr, is there a requirement that staff have to, have some drama experience before they work at the library or are involved in the videos? Because I noticed it seemed to shine forth in that video, so that's, wondering about that. Just shows creativity.
I don't know. Character?
Yeah.
It's not in any of the job descriptions.
No, not on any of them, eh? Well, maybe in the programming, I recall programming before, that was certainly an asset, I remember. But in any event, what I wanted to say and give a compliment, because I think it is important. When you were first hired as the CEO of the library, I remember talking to you one time, and you explaining to me that, and humbly, that one of your gifts and priorities was fundraising. And I think that this video again shows that since you've become CEO, that fundraising focus has come more into line all the time. And I think it's really important, the fundraising, because I think it sends a message to people in the community. It's not only the idea of the fact that it's a form of partnershiping in a way, so that's a buy-in and engaging there. But I think it also says when the people in an organization are working that hard to fundraise, to gather money, to do more for the library, that I think it's also easier for others to say, well, they're putting in that extra effort, so we can see they're just not wanting, shall we say, a handout, but rather they're just wanting, again, more of a step up. So I think the fundraising role that the library has been playing, it's growing, and I really value that, and I hope it will continue. So thank you.
Any further questions? Comments? No?
I'd just like to say thank you to council and
Oh,
thank
thank
you
you.
for being on the finance.
Yeah, thank you to the staff and to the board as well. Thanks. Our next deputation is Bill Martin, Gardens Retirement Development Incorporated. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Quite enjoyed that video. We should have bought a splashy video. It's a very positive reaction. But as an offshoot, I can ask our people to make a donation to the library also this year. It's an excellent program. We're back on our little apartment building we're proposing beside the gardens of Parry Sound. This is going to be a 40 to 60 unit building, 4 stories, and we've been wrestling with the probably the parking ratio. That's been the only issue with the planning staff. But we have come to an agreement. We originally asked for a ratio of 0.5 spaces per unit, and we've doubled that, and we're at 1.0 for a senior style building. And also on the accessible units, where the requesters, I think that the bylaw is 1 to 30 spaces. We want to double that also, and make it 2 per 30 spaces. And I think that was reflected in the planning report. So we just want to point that out, and also that we're in agreement with the planning report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you for being here and bringing that forward. Are there any questions from council with regard to this? Councilor Horn?
Thank you for coming this evening. Just curious about your time frame if this moves forward in terms of construction.
We don't know yet. Like the land is severed, and this would be the zoning. And then we have a lot of work to do on the business plan still, what and how. And where the existing building is, we call it independent supportive living and some assisted living. This is one notch down. It's just called independent living. And we're still trying to map out exactly what the animal looks like and how it works. So I'm not sure if it's 1 year or 2 years, but that would be the approximate horizon.
Great. Thank you.
Housing is in short supply in our community, so We certainly encourage a sooner, is good, yeah. Are there any other questions from council? Councilor Backlund?
Thank you. I recently read an article regarding, an intergenerational, living opportunity between, senior housing, and, Canada College up in North Bay. And what they did is that they put, they created a system where, they would offer residence as well in connection to support the intergenerational living, with the seniors. And I was just wondering if you mentioned you were just in the midst of your business time, is that something that would be of any interest? Because we do have a college in our community with no residents, and it just seemed like a really interesting model.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we have discussed that, and we have discussed that with Canada College, how to do some integration with it, and it's really in the discussion stage, but yes, we are interested in that model.
That's really great to hear, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If anyone has any questions right now, of Parry, because we'll be going to the bylaw once we, finish some of the stuff from closed. Now would be the time to ask him any questions with regard to, what's in the bylaw or what we're proposing, so. No, we're good? Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next deputation, 5.3, is from Keith Smith, and that is with regard to handicap spaces at the gardens proposed in building. Welcome, Keith.
Don't get old. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Oh, microphone. Press the button on the front. Okay, good.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Councilors, and I wish you a happy new year and a prosperous new year. I appreciate the time offered to me to bring our concerns to you again tonight. The residents are hoping that the parking at the new building or complex will be self-sufficient. Our existing parking was at full capacity several times this past summer. Take a few minutes tomorrow or sometime in the future, go up with the snow plowing contract. The parking there is getting diminished quite considerably. But the town can't get involved because it's on private property. After your council meeting last October 15th, Mr. Murdermaid asked if they could have a few minutes to talk. We had about a 10 or 15 minute conversation, and I believe Mr. Murdermaid had some input with local management at the gardens with regards to parking. The local management of the gardens announced in early November that the residents with vehicles will have 23 complimentary reserved numbered parking spaces for people with vehicles. It's not handicapped, but it sure as hell helps the people. They know where they're going to go when they get back from a short visit. They got a vehicle. That roughly is 25% of the 101 units. If you're looking at some ratio, I think you should be. Just a little background, from June to October, I made numerous phone calls to every local government. In September, I had a meeting with the local management, letter, 27 signatures, about parking. I visited Norm Miller's office 5 times, this office here 3 times. Norm Miller's office said that he would take it up in the legislature assembly in the near future. I don't want to hold my breath. I believe I will live long enough. I believe I will not live long enough to see any results. Guess what? The same answer from all the above. The gardens of Parry Sound retirement home is on private property and they're following all bylaws, acts. Thanks to Mr. Marvin, we have pretty damn good parking for seniors and handicapped. They're not handicapped spots, but at least the seniors know where the hell we're going. It's got handicap permits. I know every town and city checks to see what the others are doing with regards to parking at these retirement homes. I've talked to 5 different communities in regards to complimentary, reserved, and numbered parking for retirement homes, and they don't have any. They all have the same answer. We are following all the laws, acts, and bylaws. Why not have this town be a leader instead of a follower? The seniors and seniors with handicaps have no input. Is the accessibility advisory committee functioning here? It wasn't back in late July 2019. Is it functioning now? If so, who's on? What input has the seniors or seniors with handicap had before this bylaw was being passed? It seems that every town and city is very anxious and eager to increase their tax base. I think it's a real shame that the seniors with handicaps have not had any input of any of the new establishments that have been built in this town in the last 10 or 15 years. I spent 40 years plus volunteering for this town. I even received the Citizen of the Year award a few years back. I love this town and I always wanted to leave it for you, your children, your grandchildren, a better place to live. And I would hope that you consider 10 complimentary reserved numbered parking spaces at this new complex. This is over and above the government's regular one cost for handicaps. I think it's only common sense that any retirement home in the future has in-ground parking and or covered parking. The winter weather elements make it very difficult for us old folks. It's a real safety concern. Trips, slips and falls and ice, trying to plow through snow is ridiculous. Time has become very precious for me, and we should all evaluate it. Evaluate our time and waste it wisely. Mr. Madame, if you have a few minutes, I'd like to talk to you afterward, but I thank Council, Mayor, very much for letting me have a few words.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any council members? Seeing none, okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
For your dedication.
Thank you.
Those are our dedications for tonight. So next is Mayor and Councilors reports. And let's start the new year off with Councilor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On December 19th, I attended the monthly meeting of the District Social Services Board in Sunridge. A good part of the evening there was spent addressing the proposed 2020 budget. On January the 3rd, I was pleased to attend the retirement party for Public Works Chairman Peter Brown. It was very well attended by the many people who worked with, and I must say respected Mr. Brown for his dedication and hard work. I wish Peter a long and happy retirement. On January the 5th, I had the pleasure of attending the Mayor's New Year's Levy at the Bobby Orr Community Center, another well-attended event. Mayor McGarvey mentioned several accomplishments from 2019 and many more that should be completed in 2020. Citizen of the Year was announced, which I will let the Mayor tell you about. And the Wasatch Little Spirit Singers performed, and that was very entertaining. On January the 7th, I attended the Welcome Home celebrations for Parry Sound's latest sensation, Aiden Dudas, on his return from the Czech Republic with a gold medal in his hand as we celebrated his participation in the World Junior Hockey Championships. Congratulations to Aiden and his family and to the Parry Sound Minor Hockey System that got Aiden started. On January the 8th, I attended the monthly meeting of the Downtown Business Association where much time was allotted to discussing the 2020 budget. Also much discussion regarding the hiring of a new executive director for the DBA following the resignation of Susan Racina. Since that meeting, I sat in on interviews with 2 prospective candidates. Unfortunately, I was out of town and not able to attend the board meeting yesterday, where I understand the decision was made to offer the position to someone who I won't name yet. I'll wait for that to be the official announcement. And that is my report. Oh, no, one more thing, sorry. I did have the pleasure of attending the announcement at the Stocky Center on January 17th, where Premier Ford and Minister Laurie Scott and MPP Norm Miller attended and made some infrastructure funding announcements, which were welcome. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gordon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. December 18th, I attended the monthly meeting of the Board of Directors at Belvedere Heights, where Ms. Tammy Johnson was retained as our new administrator. Tammy comes to us from Lakeland. She's well embedded in this community, and we look forward to having her in our employment for a number of years to come. The board also continues to negotiate for additional back office services with the West Parry Sound Health Center, which I think makes us a bit of a forerunner with respect to the Ontario Health Team that is being proposed. But on the 7th, the Airport Commission met to review its budget further, and as Councillor Burden reported, I also attended the reception for Aiden Dudas. That came about, that was a Tuesday night after they'd won the gold medal, just a couple days beforehand. So I want to thank all those folks who were involved in putting that together on such a short notice. I think especially his grandmother, who was the driver behind that event and really made it happen. It's clear that Aiden's a credit to the community. He spoke specifically to the youth of our community in the few minutes that he spoke at the event, telling them not to give up their dream, and if they work at it hard enough and long enough, they too can have success. So a real role model for the youth in Parry Sound. January 13th, the Board of Belvedere held a special meeting to choose officers and make committee assignments for the 2020 calendar year. I want to thank Lynn Gregory for continuing as the chairman of the board. I think she's done a terrific job over the past 12 months in keeping us in line. On the 14th, the Airport Commission met with Mr. Bejan from FedNor and Dustin Turner from NOHFC with respect to future plans and, of course, the rebuild of the runway. Building lots you see along Highway 400 are basically ready to go. The location will prove to be a huge asset to any firm that chooses to construct their business in that area. And there are a number who are kicking tires. I too attended the Premier's session at the Stocky Center on Friday. And the Airport Commission had the pleasure of hosting him Friday afternoon. He took interest in both our runway situation and the private sector development that is happening there, and encouraged us in a number of ways. So that's a positive. And that's my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McKeon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and everyone. A number of items that I've been involved with has been mentioned, so just briefly touching on them. Wednesday, December 18th, yes, there was a Belvedere Heights Board of Management meeting. Housekeeping duties and such were attended to, accepting financial statements, amendments to Constitution, bylaws, light leases, water meters, and the whole kitchen sink. The Thursday evening, December 19th, I attended the Parry Sound Coat of Arms Committee meetings. We're very close. We have been in discussions with the Sox Impersonation, and they have passed a resolution accepting the Eagle as a representative for them on our new crest. And Herdman, who's been doing much of the research and organizing this, informed us that we may still have a glitch or two in the overall design. The standards for an authentic coat of arms are very stringent. It's been quite a learning curve as we go along, but again, credit to Anne for doing such a great job. Sunday, January 5th, my wife and I attended the Mayor's New Year's Levy in the Hart Trophy Room at the Bonneville Community Center. Congratulations to this year's recipient. Again, I'll let Mr. Mayor speak about the recipient. We did have a bit of a little informal farewell get together for Marshall Rivers, our outgoing CEO at Belvedere Heights, and that was Friday afternoon, January 10th. Chance to say thank you for her work, and as Councillor Borneman mentioned, we did have a special meeting on Monday the 13th, and again, I would echo the same sentiments. Thanks to Lynn Bravery for sitting still in the chair for another season, another term. It's a big job, a big responsibility, and a lot of moving targets now as we move forward. And as well, I had the opportunity to be at the Stockey Center last Friday morning for the funding announcement. And just one more I'd like to pass along. I was hoping she'd be here tonight, but she will be here next month, so she promises. Linda Taylor, the Director of Community Support Services, will be making a deputation to council. She's going to bring us up to date on what CSS does for the community, how it benefits families, and particularly seniors. We mentioned seniors living at Lakeland and Belvedere, but there are many seniors who are living on their own throughout the area, many who have limited means, may be lonely, and CSS does a lot for them. So she's going to be talking about what they do, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to consider adding a funding request to our budget discussions in the next couple of weeks as well. So I look forward to Linda being here. I believe it's February, the second meeting in February, I think it was. February 18th, so that it is the second. And so that's fine. And yeah, so a belated Happy New Year to everyone, and that's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Backer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Happy New Year, everyone. On Friday, with fellow councillors, on behalf of Mayor McGarvey, I attended and hosted Premier Doug Ford and the Honourable Laurie Scott, Minister of Infrastructure, for an amazing announcement of over $200 million government investment this year for small, rural, and northern community infrastructure projects. And I'd just like to say how thankful and grateful we are as the town of Parry Sound to receive $750,000 and change from the $5.8 million that was allocated to West Parry Sound. I would like to make note that I did not see any First Nations on that list, and I do hope that the government recognizes that there are other First Nations in our community fall under West Parry Sound, and as one community grows in economic infrastructure, how it benefits the entire region. As well, on Monday, January 21st, I attended on behalf of Mayor McGarvey the Chamber of Commerce AGM. It was well attended of over 17 people. They seem to be doing very well this year with over $7,000 in the bank, which is very much better than past years. They will be coming to the board with the support, but there is hope over 2 to 3 years that they do plan to be looking at a more sustainable model, and as stated in their bylaws, they will be independent. So that is something to look forward to. And that is my announcement for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy New Year. A number of events have already been mentioned. So I only had one committee meeting, and that was the Parry Sound Committee of Adjustment, and there was 2 zoning applications for approval, and that was done. And thank you very much. That's my report. Go.
Thank you. Councillor Keith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, staff, and the public. Happy New Year. It's a new decade, and hopefully with new promises, and that it will only be better than last decade. I helped out at the Salvation Army at the Kettle prior to, of course, this meeting, and also helped out on Christmas Day at St. James Center leading the Christmas sing-song and helping serve the Christmas Day, and I think, on Christmas Day, and I think it's really important that we recognize that lots of times on Christmas Day, not everybody does have family, and how important that service and availability is. I attended the retirement dinner for Director Peter Brown, has been mentioned, as well as the Mayor's New Year's Eve levy and the welcoming of Aidan Duda at the Bobby Orr Community Center. And I also want to say there, I thought it was really great the way all the Canadian flags were available for people to wave, and also the lovely posters that were up welcoming him. There was a lot of talent in our community, and I think sometimes that gets missed. I too attended the Committee of Adjustment meeting, which has been mentioned. I attended the Salvation Army's volunteer recognition dinner last week. And unfortunately, due to work, I wasn't able to attend the official announcement of the infrastructure funding. So what I did was I just went ahead and made a point of meeting with the MPP, Norm Miller, and Aid, and thanking him in advance for the great announcement that was to happen and the amount of funding we would be receiving. So I did my best in the situation, and I think that's all we can do sometimes. So thank you for my report.
Thank you. Council, staff, and public, January 5th, as mentioned, was the New Year's levy. It was great to see so many people out to the event for basically standing room only at one point. It was really appreciated. My comments can be found on the town's website, and certainly congratulations to Peter Istvan for being selected for the Order of Parry Sound. Peter has volunteered and contributed greatly to the community and raised significant funds through his Fellow for Parkinson's event. The Sweet Honey Festival, which also has been started and going, and the apiary at Canada College, and certainly a well-deserved person for the Order of Parry Sound, so I was very pleased. I'd like to thank Rebecca Johnson and her team for putting the event together, the Little Spirit Singers from Wissahickon for their participation, Jim and Patsy McCoury for preparing the food, the entertainment by Bill Mack, our CAO Clayton Harris was on hand, which was good. Councilors Burden, McCann, and Keith, also thank you for being there, and everyone who attended the event. It's really good to see the community get out and at least, you know, not only recognize the importance of the Order of Parry Sound, but to hear what's going on in the community. And as I said again, it will be, my remarks will be on the website. They may be there already, I don't know. Some of them are there. Okay, all right. January 7th, big thank you to Dave Garrigan and April McNamara for their efforts in putting something together, a welcome home for Aidan Dudas, for being a member of the IIHF junior team that won gold in the World Hockey Championship. Great effort, and the event was pulled together on very short notice, and it was great to see so many people come out to say congratulations, and I was certainly pleased to be part of the event, and congratulations to Aidan, great work, and he seems to be taking it all very well in stride, which is very commendable for a young lad at that age, and to have that spotlight shone on him. So I think we'll see a lot more from that fellow in the future, so which is good. January 9th at noon, I attended the opening ceremony for the third Thousand Island Bonds Bill, very long-standing event that brings out many of the out-of-town curlers to Parry Sound, and Councillor Horn had a house full at one point. So January 9th at 7 p.m. I attended the Parry Sound District Social Services Board meeting, which was held in Parry Sound. Main topic of discussion for that meeting was the 2020 budget, which was passed, and I've given some of the information to the town staff. January 17th, thank you to Councillor Bachman for filling in as Deputy Mayor for the Administrative Infrastructure announcement that was made here in Parry Sound. It was great that they made the announcement here with Minister Scott the Premier and our MPP, Mike Miller. Infrastructure money is extremely important to Ontario municipalities, and I was informed a couple of weeks before about the announcement, and I already had a commitment that day in Toronto chairing Amos Housing Task Force. We had members coming from across the province in attendance on the phone. We also met with two different departments of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to provide input on some work that they are currently working on. January 20th, I was able to talk to both the Premier and Minister Scott at the Roma conference and thank them for the funding and making the announcement in Parry Sound. And of note, the Premier, during his speech, mentioned Parry Sound 4 times at least, and his wonderful experience that he had here, so he was very, very pleased. January 20th, I also want to thank Councillor Bachman for attending the Chamber of Commerce AGM on Monday. Thank you for doing that. I had a number of duties to fulfill at the Roma conference in Toronto, so that kept me really busy. January 17th, as I mentioned, I was in Toronto for the Amos Housing Task Force. January 19th to the 21st, I was in Toronto for the Rural Ontario Municipal Association Conference, otherwise known as Roma. This year's conference had a record attendance with over 1,300 participants, an almost full slate of provincial ministers for the Bear Pit session, and over 350 delegations of different ministries. And January 20th, I kicked off the day with a speech, an update from AMO, and then at noon, I attended a press conference with the Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips. Ontario municipalities had secure OMPF funding for 2020 and 2021, which is really good, which makes our budgets a little bit easier to handle, and we're not guessing as to the amount of money that we're going to get. They have committed to the full 500 million in 2021 as well. January 19th, I attended a provincial roundtable put on by MAPRA. Parliamentary Assistant Randy Pettipies was the MPP representing the ministry. And January 21st, this morning, I attended a delegation with representatives from our area municipalities and our MPP, Norm Miller, with regard to the recreational complex. We met with Parliamentary Assistant Stephen Crawford from the Ministry of Infrastructure, and I would like to thank Mayor Robinson for putting the delegation together and making the registration. And that's my report. So, we have some ratifications from closed. First item is 7.1, and it's moved by Councillor Burton and seconded by Councillor Borneman. The bylaw number 2020-7012, being the bylaw to authorize the execution of an employment agreement for the position of Director of Public Works, be considered as read first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Carried. Moved by Councillor Borneman, seconded by Councillor Burton, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? You want to say something?
Yeah, I guess certainly on behalf of myself and council, I'm very pleased to announce that Michael Kearns is the town's new Director of Public Works. His official start date will be January 27th, so next Monday. We're very anxious to get him started. I think he's very anxious to come to the town. As many of you probably know, he works currently for the township of the Archipelago. So our neighbor's a little upset with us right now, but I think they'll get over it. And we've agreed that he can work with them to help them through their transition as they look for a replacement. And anyway, we're very excited about his taking this position and looking forward to the start of Monday.
Thank you. Any further? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, consent agenda 8.1. Moved by Councillor McCann and seconded by Councillor Borneman that Council of Corporation Town of Parry Sound authorizes the West Parry Sound Health Auxiliary to hold a tag day on July 10th, 2020 for the purposes of fundraising. Discussion, all in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2, moved by Councilor Burton and seconded by Councilor McCann. Whereas International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation, FGM, is observed around the world and provides an opportunity to honor those women, girls, boys, and men who are actively and courageously working towards an end to this harmful practice. Whereas this day invites us to reflect on the fact that 3.9 million girls are still at risk of mutilation each year, including girls in Canada. Whereas on this day we acknowledge that female genital mutilation is an issue on every continent except Antarctica, and there are 200 million FGM survivors in the world, including thousands in Canada. Whereas we acknowledge that FGM has no basis in any religious text and is recognized by the United Nations and other world bodies as child abuse and an abuse of girls' fundamental human rights. Whereas we acknowledge that FGM has no benefits and causes only harm, including death, difficulties with urination, menstruation, sexual intimacy, post-traumatic stress disorder, and increased maternal and child mortality. Whereas on this International Day of Zero Tolerance for FGM, we acknowledge and celebrate all national and international efforts being made, especially at the grassroots level, to achieve United Nations Sustainable Millennium Development Goal number 5, which calls for the elimination of FGM and other harmful traditional practices by 2030. Whereas on this day of zero tolerance, we call for increased concerted global and Canadian action to end female genital mutilation and ask all governments, international, national, and local, to fully uphold the human rights of women and girls so they can live a life free of violence, that is female genital mutilation. Now therefore, the town of Parry Sound does hereby proclaim February 6, 2020 as International Day of Zero Tolerance for FGM in the town of Parry Sound. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Item 8.3. Oh, still consent. Moved by Councilor Keith, second by Councilor Horn, that for the purposes of obtaining special occasion permit, Council declares that the day-long Parry Sound Snowfest 2020 event scheduled on February 16th at 9 Bay Street, Parry Sound is an event of municipal significance. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Item 8.4, moved by Councilor Horn, second by Councilor Bachman. Council accepts the resignations from the Parry Sound Downtown Business Association Board of Dan B. Nicole, September 13th, 2019, and Amy Black, January 13th, 2020, and amends resolution 2019-012, or removing their appointments to the board. Any discussion? All in favor then? That's carried. Certainly want to thank them for their service on the DBA. It's always appreciated. Moved by Councilor Horn, second by Councilor Bachman, that bylaw number 2019-6999, being a bylaw to amend the bylaw 2004-4653, the zoning bylaw is amended, Rosette 19/14, 12 College Drive, M2 Development Incorporated, Gardens of Parry Sound, be considered for the first time. That's what we read at the one meeting, And we are now, it was moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Bachman, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time passed, signed and sealed, because that was brought from that agenda. So, discussion. Councillor Keith.
Yes, I was just gonna say to start with, I really appreciated the report that I realize has come back again to us, that Mr. Taylor LV wrote, and there's certainly a lot of thought put into it. However, there's still some change I would be asking in reference to the bylaw that is here for our second and third passing. And I'm going to propose the amendment, and I'm quite willing to explain why I am proposing it. The amendment, so it would be actually, the bylaw would be on page 3 on your computer. So that first paragraph that starts off despite and ends with lands, I am asking that that instead be amended, so it would be basically removed, and instead the paragraph would be replaced with, despite section 4.30 bracket N, 10% of all required parking spaces shall be barrier-free parking spaces for any retirement residence, comma, retirement residence dash special or dwelling dash apartment on the subject lands. That's the only part that I'm asking to be amended.
Okay. Do we have a second? Councillor Burton. I would like clarification from Mr. Elgie as to what's being proposed and what Mr. Marty suggested tonight, and how this compares with this amendment to the bylaw.
Okay. So the bylaw staff has prepared, which Mr. Marmay spoke of, it would have 4 barrier-free parking spaces and 60 parking spaces total. He illustrated the point that the original request coming in for the same size building was originally request to have only 30 parking spaces with 1 barrier-free space. So there's already 3 more tonight versus what was originally requested. What Councillor Keith has suggested, 10%, sort of this, that'd be 6, so it'd be even 2 more than what staff has recommended. So original request was 1 barrier-free parking space. There was agreement on 4. That's what's in front of council tonight, the bylaw that received 1 reading. And Councillor Keith is suggesting 6 barrier-free spaces. This being one aspect of a much bigger bylaw, though.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, this is dealing with just this particular bylaw, but we have, and the reason we do this, because there is a provincial standard out there with regard to handicap spaces for parking spaces. So we're suggesting going beyond that, and there was clarification from Mr. Murray that he was willing, I believe, to go to the 4 spaces.
Yeah.
And we're asking to go to another 2 spaces beyond that.
That is correct.
Okay. Councillor Keith, clarification please, and then Councillor McCann.
Yes, I'm asking to go to 6. In this case, it would be 6 parking spaces that are barrier-free. 10%, I think that's a round number, and I think we need to start in our community. We have to be a leader, and although the province has their standards, as I understand it, as a bylaw, we are able to go beyond what the provincial standards are. And I think that in our community, we have a large percentage of seniors. We see that we have many people that are disabled, and I think that we need to show leadership here, and it is an opportunity to say, we really care about the people in our community, and we're trying to do our best to provide barrier-free parking spaces so that it is a welcoming, caring sign to show how important it is to us in the community that we include everybody, and we are trying to do our best to make it accessible and include people. I think the other thing is in the report, there was the indication that yes, if you have more parking spots, you use more land, but on the other side of the coin, we're wanting more people to come into our community and live in our community. So I think we want to show that we are trying to be as inviting as we can. And I think if we go forward and we pass this tonight, then in other developments, we can also look at doing the same thing so it is consistent and fair and predictable. But we need to start somewhere, and I think this is a good start right here.
So on that, I'll get to you in a moment, Councilor McCann. Mr. Aldridge, do you have any clarification as to those handicap spots? Are they for general usage, or are they designated spots? And is the proponent for the development looking at designating spots for the apartment like he's now done with the gardens of Parry Sound?
Your Worship, I'm not sure on the last question whether the developer plans on dedicating certain spots to certain units. That's outside of the scope of zoning as far as I'm aware, so we can't control that for this type of application essentially.
Okay. Yeah.
Staff isn't positive on whether or not it is actually appropriate or legal to dedicate barrier-free parking spaces. I spoke with bylaw as well as our accessibility coordinator / human resources, and we're kind of the feeling that if all of the barrier-free parking spaces were dedicated to certain people on site, if someone in a wheelchair or need one of those spaces were to come to the site, where would they park? Right. So it doesn't seem that meets the intent of the legislation. That being said, I called the province to try to verify that, and it doesn't seem that this has really been explored or challenged yet. And unofficially, they kind of felt that this would be a site-by-site discretion, and it hasn't arisen yet as case law, essentially.
Well, it sounds like you've done some of your homework with regard to clarification on something. Councilor McCann.
Yeah, so for Mr. Algie then, exactly what is a barrier-free spot?
Through your worship, barrier-free accessible parking space or handicap spaces. They're currently called accessible spaces, but they're all largely one and the same as far as I'm aware.
So I guess my second question is, how tight are things now? Like, is there room to do this? Above and beyond what's in your recommendation tonight?
Sort of like a spatial room?
To go the extra, to go the additional barrier-free spots.
Currently, the site is a greenfield, so there is no space constraint at this stage. The applicant has agreed with staff's recommendation, but there is no constraint if that's what you're asking. It's not the existing site, it's a new site.
I guess I'm asking, is there additional hardship to the developer at this point in terms of adding those spots and maintaining them, I guess?
Through your worship, I can't speak of the developer, but I do know my report with more barrier-free spaces comes more land need to be paved, which more stormwater runoff, more vegetation removal. On a small scale like this, it might not add up, but if it were to be community-wide, it could lead to larger consequences. All this being said, though, the more barrier-free spaces you have, the less regular parking spaces the site will have, because it's a percentage of it. So if you only have 60 parking spaces total, that leaves 2 fewer.
So the greenfield, if we don't go with the additional barrier-free spots, does that leave greenfield open, or does that leave, the room then for regular parking then?
Through your worship, it would really be negligible in a case like this. We're only talking a handful of meters extra between the two spaces.
Okay, thank you.
But one thing that we might do, okay, is the more handicap spaces you have in front of the building will push out, if they do designate parking spaces for tenants, and if tenants have a handicap issue, that will then push out those designated spaces further into the parking lot, making it harder for some of those people to get to their units.
That could happen.
That could happen, yeah. Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? So, Councilor Martin.
I think we've seen tonight that the proponent has made significant progress in terms of working with the tenants that are presently there and moving forward with this building, exceeding municipal and provincial standards already. So is this going to be a further implication in terms of development? Are other developers looking at this? I'm not sure, but certainly to go above what we require and agree to the staffing report that's been here certainly satisfies my need.
Thank you. Councilor McCann.
I guess the question would be, is it within our purview to dictate that we would insist that the developer add the extra units, barrier-free units?
Your worship, it absolutely is.
But we've also seen compromise in this as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, anything further on the amendment? No? Those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed to the amendment? Can I see who's opposed to the amendment again? Okay. It's defeated. Yeah. So, we have the bylaw then in front of us. Are there any other questions with regard to the bylaw? No? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10.11, it's moved by Councilor Horn, second by Councilor Backlund, that bylaw 2020-7003, being a bylaw to specify tax policies including clawback percentages, capping threshold parameters, minimum tax level for new to class and new construction, and to exclude certain properties from the capping program for the year 2020. Be considered as read the first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councilor Horn, second by Councilor Backlund, the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time. Passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Councilor Horn.
I ask every year for Mr. Beaumont to remind us and the public what it is that we're doing here for both this item and the next one.
So you can take a seat there for a
That's what I'm suggesting.
Welcome, Mr. Beaumont.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council, and Happy New Year all. As you've probably heard this speech before in the past, and Councilor Gorman does ask every year, these capping provisions are set by the province that, as I've said in the past, we have 3 properties right now that are still covered under this capping provision. 2 are paying for the reduction of the 1 property. But what I've added this year to my report is that I'm in contact with Opta that does our calculations for the capping properties. And we're within the range now that we can start to phase out the 3 properties that are into the capping program still, which means that until they get to CVA, if they don't reach their initial CVA, their current value assessment within the next 4 years, they'll automatically be withdrawn from the capping. But with any time within that 4 years, they do reach their current value assessment, they will automatically be out of the capping and back to where their tax status should be.
Yes, Councilor Horn.
So in English, Mr. Beaumont, does that mean everybody's paying their fair share?
Through your worship, yes, it will be.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? All in favor? And that's carried, thank you. Item 10.1.2, moved by Councilor Horn, second by Councilor Backlund. The bylaw number 2020-7004, being a bylaw to set tax ratios for municipal purposes for the year 2020, be considered as read the first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Carried. Moved by Councilor Horn, second by Councilor Backlund, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Do we need to go without asking then? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Beaumont.
Again, these, the racial bylaws before you right now, and it's pretty standard. It's been the same way since pretty much 2008. The ratio is like a percentage. What we want to do is the residential rate is set at 1, and the ratios outside of that class are higher. If you decide to move those ratios, you have to go down closer to 1, which will mean the shift to the burden of the taxes will be on the residential property owners. Seeing that the shift is downward and it gets put on the residential homeowners, which will mean an increase to their taxes. So, as you can see, my recommendation is to keep the ratios the same, keep the tax levels the same until we can find a way to increase our assessments. Over the last few years, we have lost a lot of assessment due to the ARB appeals from the big box stores, etc. So it doesn't help when those big assessed properties are being having their assessments reduced, because that just shifts the burden again on the residential people. So.
Okay. Councilor Horn.
Thank you. Could you, Mr. Beaumont, just tell us approximately the amount of tax assessment we have lost, combining the big box stores, the nonprofit housing in the last couple of years on a yearly basis?
And pretty much to a better dollar value. Speaking in dollars, approximately over the last, we'll say 3 years, it's probably close to $300,000 that we've lost. And then that 300,000 eventually will get shifted to the residential taxpayers. So.
Thanks.
Any further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Councilor Keith and seconded by Councilor Horn. The bylaw number 2020-7005, being about to authorize temporary borrowing to meet current expenditures, monetary sound until taxes are collected and other revenues received, be considered by the first time. All in favor? Carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? And that's carried. Moved by Councilor Keith and seconded by Councilor Horn. That the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Councillor Key.
Yes, perhaps Ms. Phillips can explain why we need to do this temporary borrowing, so we don't have panic in the community.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so the municipalities typically pass a bylaw like this every year. The purpose of it is in case of an emergency or due to the nature of property taxation only being collected on certain installment dates throughout the year. Typically municipalities hold like a line of credit for operating purposes on a just in case basis. So this bylaw allows the municipality to borrow in case there's operating deficiency, but we do not anticipate at this time that we'll have to use the bylaw. It's just to increase the efficiency in the case that there ever was an emergency, that we would be able to do that without having to come back to council and waiting for a bylaw to be passed in that event.
Councillor Key.
So what I heard in a very simple fashion is we're being proactive in the worst scenario.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Most municipalities, DSAB, they all do it, so. Any further discussion, questions? No, all in favor then? And that's carried, thank you. Okay, item 10.2.1a, moved by Councillor Thornton, second by Councillor Burton, the bylaw number 2020-7006, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a memorandum of understanding with area municipalities and First Nations located in the Georgian Bay Biosphere region for the purpose of collaborative, more cost-effective approach to energy management and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Carried. Councillor Burton, second by Councillor Borneman, the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? No? Okay. Councillor Back.
I guess I'll just ask around the council table if anybody is interested in participating.
Well, that's the next one.
Oh, sorry, I jumped at it. Forgive me.
I know I have had one councillor already suggest that. Councillor Borneman, did you have something you wanted to comment on? No? Okay. No further comment on this one. All in favor? That's carried. Item 10.2.1b, moved by Councillor Burton, second by Councillor McCann, that Council of Town of Parry Sound appoints blank to participate in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities / ICLEI Partners for Climate Protection Program, as well as the Integrated Community Energy and Climate Action Plans ICECAP Partnership. Councillor Borneman, you had.
Yeah, I had indicated to you, Mr. Mayor, that I was.
You were interested. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was interested, but I didn't know there was another counselor, so Paul's interested and I support that.
Okay, all right. Councillor Paul Borneman's name goes into the fill the blank. Any discussion on this? Councillor Moore?
I was just wondering, in terms of the outcome and the metrics for achieving, if we could just have an explanation in terms of moving this forward and the purpose of the collaborations. Of course. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Banger.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot that goes into all of this, and really the first half, I guess, of the bylaw itself is to come together. You previously passed the resolution to join the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, initially for the 5 milestone framework. Now, in coming together with some of the area municipalities, initially our discussions were rather loose, and we had a lot of interest. But it seemed that we needed to formalize a relationship to actually be productive, and that's where the MOU came from. So working with the biosphere, as well as area municipalities, we're going to be able to kind of piggyback on the efforts of each other to streamline the process, because a lot of the work ends up being duplicated across each partner. So the more efficient that we can get, and just even something as simple as acquiring data, processing data, there's big wins there. The other side of it is we can actually come up with a more meaningful action plan. So, if the town went at this alone, which we certainly could, the meaning would be lost, because, not in entirety, but in part because, we're made up of a much larger area with all sorts of different partners. So, the intent is quite simple. We can do more for less, more meaningful.
Great. Okay. Anything else? No? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor McCann, that bylaw number 2020-7008, and bylaw to amend bylaw number 2004-4653, the zoning bylaw is amended for 11 North Street. John Jackson Planner Incorporated, on behalf of Brian Moore, be considered as read first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having second and third readings? And that's carried. Moved by Councilor McCann, second by Councilor Borneman, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion. Councilor McCann.
At the risk of being a little difficult, I suppose, I'm going to ask, we let Trestle Crewing off the hook with this, and I would think that there were enough reasons given to do away with the cash for lieu on this particular unit, given the letter that was sent to us today, the correspondence from Mr. Jackson. So I think I'm not going to support this one.
Okay. Any further comment? All right. All in favor? Those opposed? It's defeated.
We have a backup bylaw prepared.
Okay.
I thought I was going to be difficult.
Oh, okay. I handle that, I guess. Do we have something prepared? Okay.
Isn't that so?
Yeah, Mr. LG, can you explain this backup bylaw?
Through your worship, it's essentially the same bylaw, but it just took away any reference to cash in lieu of parking. staff's of the opinion that it's council's prerogative and responsibility to ultimately waive fees. So in the staff report, I noted where, in this case, the applicant has some really good reasons why the fee should be waived, hence why the bylaw was prepared, because it seemed like it was the eventual outcome.
Okay, so, as I move to second, Councilor McCann and Councilor Horn. So this would be, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2004-4653, the zoning bylaw is amended for Z 19/12 Mill Street, John Jackson Planner, incorporated on behalf of Brian Moore, be considered as read at first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Mover and seconder for final part of it. Councilor McCann, Councilor Keith. The bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time. Passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion. All in favor? That's carried. So I guess there'll be that's the very rough copy.
Yeah, 42 pages.
Good. Very, very rough copy. Okay, moved by, Councilor Baxton, second by Councilor Horn, the bylaw number 2020-7009, being bylaw to require pre-consultation for certain planning applications and to delegate authority to determine certain application procedures, be considered as read first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Good, that's carried. Moved by Councilor Bachman, second by Councilor Horn, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion. Councilor McCann.
Mr. Elder again. Two questions. Just basically, can you explain what we're doing here? And secondly, under the definitions where I see inactivity, this is all before the shuttle goes in the ground. Do I understand correctly? I guess I'm thinking about construction projects that sort of take dormant for years on end, that become an eyesore more than anything else. But maybe I'm jumping the gun as to what this is all about.
Through your worship, the pre-consultation bylaw is essentially formalizing and streamlining a process that largely already occurs. Typically, most applicants, before they submit a planning application, they talk to staff and just try to understand what are the expectations, what do you need, what's the paperwork, and largely it's a meet and greet. The end result, but by formalizing it, is actually advantageous for applicants because they'll have a written record of what's going on. So if it's been quite some time, they have something to refer to, and they won't be getting in a situation where there's a lack of clarity. So this does streamline it in staff's opinion. Second question, this would be well before shovels in the ground. So inactivity doesn't refer to on the building site, it refers to paperwork. So as an example, if an application was submitted and there wasn't a signature on it and you were asking them to come in and sign it for over a year in this case, you said, we're really not interested, we're going to close this file because we haven't been able to get a signature in a year.
Okay, thank you.
Any further? Councilor Keith?
So I think what we're clearly hearing here is we follow through with this tonight, and there's better accountability, transparency, and clarity for all parties Thanks.
Through your worship, that's correct, and the very last pages are the draft, and it'll change with time, checklist to go over with application, and it does show kind of how comprehensive developing is these days, but not every application will be subject to all of these, it is a varying degree.
But checklists are good, that way people know exactly what they have to do. I think I asked for something like that years ago to be done, and I think we were kind of doing sort of something like that, but this is even better.
Yeah, that was, you're correct, we did do it years ago, and that was a checklist on the actual application page, so this is one before we even get there, so
Yes.
lots of checklists.
Yeah. Well, at least you know that, right? Yeah. So all in favor? And that's carried. Oh, yeah, we're gonna defeat this one. No, because we didn't get there, so this one's withdrawn. Okay. So, because we defeated that one bylaw, and then there was a resolution afterwards, 1032A, okay, which set the rate for the cash and lieu. So it becomes a default, we don't do it, right?
Sorry, we're going back to 11 Village Street.
So yeah, I just noticed this extra piece of paper here, and it was stuck underneath the other one, so.
It was the companion resolution
Yeah.
to the rezoning bylaw requiring, cash and lieu parking, at $5,551 per space. So with, Tim, sure. Like with the defeat of that bylaw related to the cash and lieu, this resolution is no longer relevant. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that's correct, the resolution was defeated, and the correct bylaw was referenced up there. There's no page, I can show you the correct one if you'd like me to.
It was the bylaw that was defeated.
Yeah. But there was
The resolution was not read, the resolution that was on the agenda was not read yet.
Oh.
So because it's related to the cash and lieu, the question is it reasonable just to withdraw? I mean, we voted on it, defeated if that's, but I'm looking to you for that clarification because of the bylaw that came forward with the amendment, the new bylaw that came forward.
Yeah, that one was passed though, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, then
The new one.
I think everything's okay then.
So then that resolution basically comes off the table, because
Yes.
it's no longer relevant.
Yes.
Right, okay. We're good. Okay, 1033, moved by Councillor Bachman, second by Councillor Horn, that bylaw number 2020-7009, being about to require, oh no, we did that one. Put that yet. 1034, moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Bachman, that bylaw number 2020-7010, being a bylaw to amend the bylaw 2004-4653, the zoning bylaw is amended for Macklem Drive and Dennis Drive, Town of Parry Sound, be considered as read the first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Bachman, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time. Passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Councillor Bachman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in regards to when this came before us at the public meeting, there was one resident, I believe it was Susan Youngs at the time, who talked about sidewalks within this area and coming down the hill. And I was just wondering, is there any further discussion regarding that or opportunity as we look at developing this area?
Through your worship, Yes, I included her letter as well in the staff report. My understanding, she was speaking of the sidewalks going north from the school's entrance up Macklin Drive all the way up the street, and the need for it, and the need for it there. So it's outside of the scope of this rezoning. That being said, it would be important if there ever was a larger sidewalk project. They weren't included in that immediate stretch where the road construction is, because they didn't lead to any at that point.
Okay.
So maybe someday in the future that could be flagged as having them installed there, but it's not really pertinent to this rezoning, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, good to know.
Anything further with regard to rezoning? No, all in favor? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith, second by Councillor Horn, being a bylaw number 2020-7007, being a bylaw to appoint Clayton Harris as deputy clerk, in addition to his appointment as chief administrative officer, and the alternate head under the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act for the Corporation of Town of Parry Sound, and considered as read first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and seconded by Councillor Thorne that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Councillor Keith.
Yes, just for clarification, I have received the question is if, and it would seem this is to some degree a housekeeping matter, but I have received the question that if this appointment occurs tonight, will that in any way affect the salary that is already paid to the CEO? Does that have any changes on things, or is it all the same basically? Just one more duty.
Through the mayor, no, there's no effect. This was always intended, but it was a housekeeping matter.
Mr. Menz was also deputy clerk.
I think it's always very good for the public to be aware.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's not coming from me to question. That's why I said I received the question. Thank you.
All right. Councilor McKenzie.
Forgive me, just in case I'm just being a little silly, but does that mean he can now bring the necklace that you get to wear? I know you don't have it on tonight.
No. I guess. Yeah. The blame. Yeah. Anyway, anything further on this? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Keith, and seconded by Councillor Bachman, that bylaw number 2020-7011, being bylaw confirmed the proceedings of council be considered as read at first time. All in favor? And that's carried. Are all members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and seconded by Councillor Bachman, the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. All in favor? That's carried. So, prior to adjourning, I'd like to offer the following information to the public regarding the next council meeting. The next regular meeting of council for the town of Parry Sound is scheduled for Tuesday, February 4th, 2020 at 7 p.m. and will be held in the council chambers, top floor, 52 Seaman Street. Public access to the building is off Gibson Street. All regular council meetings are held at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesday of each month, except January and August, where only one regular meeting is scheduled. Regular and special meetings are live streamed. Please check news and public notices on their website at www.parrysound.ca for instructions to watch live or see earlier council meetings. Prior to a council meeting, agendas, changes in the council meeting schedule, and notices of special council meetings are posted on the town's website at www.parrysound.ca under news and public notices. You can view an electronic copy of the complete agenda with supporting reports on the town's website. Search council calendar and the date of the meeting. Contact the town clerk or make a request to their website if you wish to receive combined agenda via email. The minutes of regular council meetings are posted with a 2 days after the council meeting on the town's website. Your TV airs council meetings on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. following the regular council meeting. For Cogeco listings, contact www.yourtv.tv. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Happy New Year and all the best in 2020.